Hello and welcome. Welcome to the 20th lecture on adaptation. Particularly today we are going to talk about the adaptation on water sector, and we will look at the responses, outcomes and constraints in the course of understanding the various options of adaptations. So, let us look at these concepts. So, the broad concepts that are being covered in this lecture is various adaptation responses with respect to the risks what we have discussed in last class, with respect to the risk in terms of the water and hydrological sector, what are the adaptation options we have. So, in that course let us discuss about the responses as far as the adaptation to water and hydrological risks are concerned. Then we will talk about the responses which are initiated by different actors. So, the same set of responses we are trying to discuss in terms of various actors, various players. So, let us understand how different players or different actors, they play a very critical role, or they have a very important role as far as the adaptation responses are concerned. The third is current and future co-benefits and outcomes. So, there we will discuss what are the co-benefits in terms of the present, and what could be the different outcomes if we practice this set of adaptation, what could be the different outcomes in the future, and the future will again see with respect to 1 degree, 1.5 degree, 2 degree and 3 degree, 4 degree. So, this set of temperature rise kind of scenarios. And then we will also try to discuss what are the different constraints, because adaptation we have a set of adaptations for different water related risk, but there are also constraints. There are also constraints that comes in the way in terms of water related adaptation across various dimensions. So, let us try to understand. So, through this lecture we are going to understand the various responses and the players and the pros and cons of this, and in terms of future scenario and also the constraints. So, with this I have taken the set of conditions or the set of adaptation responses which are on the left hand side, and their description in terms of adaptation response are put on the right hand side. So, let us try to understand, and in this course take examples where they are practiced, they are followed, they are adapted successfully across different part of the world. So, this will give a very good confidence that yes, people across the world have already started adapting, adjusting to this kind of adaptation means in response of the water risk in different ways of adaptation responses. So, the first one on the left hand side is changes in the cropping pattern and the crop system. So, we talk about the different kind of cropping pattern and the crop system. So, in different part of the world they have been slightly changed, modified to adjust or to adapt to the water or hydrological risk scenario. So, first is changes in the cropping pattern. For example, introduction of sugarcane and rice in some part of Costa Rica in terms of is one of the adaptation strategy. So, if you introduce sugarcane and rice, then perhaps you are taking care of in terms of the difference or in terms of the adaptation as far as the crop responses is concerned. The crop diversification are practiced in Ethiopia and Zimbabwe in Africa, the crop, and also in Tanzania. Second is changes in the timing and sowing of the harvesting. So, if we little bit shift plus or minus 4 days, 1 week, half a week, this side or that side with respect to our sowing of the seeds on the crop field, or and in terms of the harvesting. So, that means we are trying to adapt in this way. A lot of examples are practiced in terms of our part of the subcontinent, India, China, Pakistan. They are slightly, because we are mostly a kind of monsoon dependent, and based on the monsoon arrival we are trying to shift little bit plus and minus in terms of number of days or half a week or so. So, that means the timing, the adaptation to are changing in terms of the sowing and harvesting time. The third one in terms of change in cropping pattern is on farm diversification, that is an integrated livestock system which is very widely practiced in France. The second component is improved, one is the change, the first one. The second one we are going to talk about the improved crop cultivars and the agronomic practices. So, how we can improve in terms of the crop cultivars. The first one is crop cultivars are such as very short duration paddy varieties are practiced in Nepal, the Himalayan state of Nepal. Saline tolerant rice cultivar in Bangladesh, because it is in terms of Bangladesh, it is a low lying country as we saw, as we have discussed, and it is prone to inundation by inundation in terms of the salters or brackish water. So, if we can develop some rice varieties or cultivar which are tolerant to salt or saline kind of situation, so that is practiced in Bangladesh. Similarly, in case of drought kind of scenario, so drought tolerant maize varieties are practiced in many places such as Zambia, and also alternate wetting and drying and direct seeding in terms of rice is practiced in our country itself in India. So, alternately you practice wet and dry. So, in the Kharif season you practice the wet, and then in the Rabi season you practice a dry. So, that itself adapts to in terms of the risk coming from the water or the hydrological sector. Now, let us go to the third component, which is the irrigation and water management practices. In terms of irrigation, construction of local irrigation infrastructure is coming in terms or practiced in terms of Chile. So, there local irrigation infrastructure are practiced. Funding of community wells. So, community well funding is practiced in Canada. Drilling of bore wells in Thailand. Irrigation practices in Ethiopia, and in terms of nighttime irrigation shielding to reduce evaporative water demand in UK. So, these are the some of the adaptations with respect to irrigation and water management. So, on farm water management and water scaling technology such as use of surface pipes for irrigation of conveyance in China is practiced, and also the drip irrigation is practiced in China, and the use of water saving measures are practiced in China. So, a lot of these are already practiced in different part of the world. So, this way we try to adapt to the situation as far as the irrigation and management practices are concerned. Now, let us come to the fourth one, that is the water and soil conservation domain. So, on farm water and soil conservation measures practiced in Burkina Faso, and terraces and contour bonds. So, you construct lot of terraces and contour bonds, so that the water does not flow straight, it halts, it takes a halt at places at each terraces. So, thereby the soil conservation and water conservation is practiced well. And water harvesting structures through on-sand dams in Kenya. In Kenya, they are putting the on-sand dams, and thereby they are harvesting the water, and terrace, and particularly in situ and ex situ water harvesting structures is practiced in India. At lot of places we come out with contour bonds, we come out with nala bonds and small embankments. There we store and we conserve both soil and water, and it is very widely practiced in India. And then watershed conservation programs, lot of water conservation programs are there in Ethiopia, and revival of water bodies in terms of the creation of artificial lake. So, it is practiced in Portugal, to be mentioned here, but in lot of our places in India also practiced, this is practiced. We are reviving lot of water bodies. So, in past few decades which have gone dry or have not been taken attention. So, now they have been revived, they have been allowed, they are allowed to to store some of the water. So, that is how they contribute in terms of the soil and water conservation. So, it is very well practiced in India. Now, coming to the fifth one in terms of the collective actions. So, in terms of collective action, policies and institutes are concerned, the first component of this is collective actions and corporations, particularly grassroots level collective action for conflict resolution is being done. So, at grassroots level you try to solve it in terms of the cooperation in a cooperative way, and then collective decision to reduce water withdrawal during drought time in Japan. So, in Japan what they do, this the Japanese, they take a collective decision that we will withdraw less water. They develop different mechanisms in terms of reducing the withdrawal of water during the drought phase. And then in terms of Bangladesh, community based adaptation, community based management in terms of rangeland in Mongolia. So, community based approaches are very useful, but the point is it is a collective action. People have to agree. There has to be a cohesive mindset. Then coming to the local institutions. Local institutions, for example, stakeholder platforms for disaster risk reduction. So, in terms of multi stakeholders, so local institutions, for any kind of these things you need people involvement who are at different levels, different different types of things they are dealing. One person is dealing with giving the information, another is in disseminating, another in execution, the other person in the relief. So, if this way they have been corroborated and multi stakeholders they come forward for one platform or to one platform, then this becomes a successful case in terms of involvement of cohesive involvement of the local institutions in terms of a collective action. Now, the water dispute resolution, conflict mitigation in terms of Costa Rica. So, they do it collectively. Institutional and policy level reform, local water and land use planning instruments in Austria, the Dutch Delta program in the Netherlands, and implementation of European Union flood directives in Sweden. So, these are all the institutional reforms. At institute level, you take lot of reformation measures and incorporate into that policy and planning, and you come out with collective actions to deal with that. Now, let us move on to the sixth one in terms of the migration and off-farm diversion. So, in terms of migration and off-farm, so you migrate. So, spontaneous migration, voluntary, for example, voluntary relocation of Solomon Islands and rural to urban migration in Ethiopia and Pakistan. So, people, even if biota, they here in terms they are spontaneously migrating from one to another. So, that is another practice, that is another not practice, but a situation to deal to adjust, to adapt in terms of the water related risk or to cope with the water related risks. The next one is employment and remittance in term is an example from Senegal, and the third one is planned relocation. You plan the relocation where the massive let us say the massive southern Sanaxi migration program in China and resettlement of floodplain communities in Bangladesh. So, when you have severe risk and recurrent risk, then you think of massive migration, both to deal with a drought condition, to deal with a flood condition. So, examples are there already in terms of massive relocation as far as coming from China and Bangladesh respectively. So, coming to off-farm diversification, migration to towns and engaging in off-farm labor wage earning in different places including Niger, Ghana, Bangladesh, and also shifting to non-pastoral livelihood in Ethiopia. So, you shift from a pasture based livelihood to another one, because pasture based livelihood needs something, you need to grow some the pasture land so that you feed your livestock. So, you change your lifestyle because you are adapting. So, so that way you respond in terms of off-farm diversification or migration from one livelihood to another livelihood to adapt and adjust to the water related risks. Now, coming to the livestock and fish related. So, the livestock related, that means livestock species diversification in Ethiopia and Kenya, which ensures livestock in Pakistan, changes in range management, all these are practiced in USA. So, different examples in terms of livestock related are already in practice in different parts of the world. So, similarly, the fishery related, in terms of the fish related, the non-destructive fishery gears and fishery gears and techniques in Ghana and Tanzania. So, non-destructive fishery. So, this itself is important because you are trying to change the fish related and livestock related activities to adjust to the changing need or the water related risk. The next one, the 10th one, is the training and capacity building. So, to adjust to this situation, we have another very important component, that is training, and also we need to build our capacity. So, information training and capacity building, for example, climate information services in Kenya and Senegal, they are receiving the information, and training contributed new learning about digging canals to avoid prolonged water loggings in Philippines, and soil conservations training program in Ethiopia. So, what we mean to say, there are different activities, there are different responses which needs to be educated, or those programs are needs to reach to the common man through various training and also capacity building network. So, that way the larger the response will reach to or will be accepted, adopted by a larger group of people or beneficiary. The 11th one is the agroforestry and forestry related responses. So, what it is? Agroforestry related measures in India, Kenya, Nigeria, and also farmer managed natural regeneration in Ghana. So, you in terms of water related risk, you have another nature based solution is you develop lot of agroforestry schemes. So, that will bring or keep the water table high, and also it will match with the evapotranspirative water demand or water loss. So, this is also a kind of adaptation if you are taking this response from the agroforestry and forest related response. Then forest related, for example, coastal afforestation by planting salinity resistant trees in Bangladesh and also Colombia. So, the different species which are resistant to saline water or salty water, so they can be planted along the coast. So, that is how these the forest related activities are acting as a or behaving as a response in terms of adaptation. The 12th is economic and finance. This is very important because if for doing everything we need some finance, some money. So, economics and finance incentives in terms of insurance. So, something is happening, you have rice crop insurance programs in Indonesia, agriculture insurance programs in South Africa. So, you are assured, the farm owner is assured. The microfinance or microcredit schemes such as in Bangladesh and in many parts of these developed nations, this also helps in terms of reducing the financial burden or economic load in case of any kind of this kind of risk. The third component of this itself is the social safety nets. In terms of the social safety nets, the food based safety net programs in Brazil. So, what happens, the food for work programs also in Ethiopia. So, social safety, you do something, you get the food. So, food is becoming as a social safety measures or insurance measures. So, food for work, you work this and do this thing. So, the benefit in terms of finance or economic things, incentives comes in terms of food, because that is very important where people are still below poverty line, or still what you say are still struggling to fill their belly in terms of 3 to 4 meals. Then coming to the subsidies and incentives are very important, because you for this for certain activities it will give a boost that you are getting this subsidy, and for certain activity if you do, you are getting certain incentives in terms of economic and financial. So these programs are really the what you say boosters or drivers, or encouraging tools for the people to go with the in terms of adapting the responses. So farm input subsidy programs in Malawi, financing programs in Canada to help producers with resources to improvement and maintain the quality of soil, water, biodiversity, and all this helps for drought migration. And then coming to the water market. So water market and tariffs, for let us say for example urban water tariffs and informal groundwater market in China. So now coming to this, so if we should also put some tariff on water usage, for water usage for different purposes, and then you see the drinking water is already being treated. So we put lot of money for that. The drinking water cannot be used for non-drinking purposes, suppose the gardening or crop irrigation, or even if washing other things in terms of for household usage. So if you put a tariff on the water usage, it will also serve in terms of, or it is a step towards the economic and financial incentives. Then coming to the payment for ecosystem services, in Mexico they have already been practiced. It is practiced, you do something in terms of adaptation or responses in terms of water risk adaptation, and you get some payment for that. So you protect a system, protect ecosystem, protect a pond system, and it is contributing towards water conservation, and you get a payment towards that particular ecosystem services you are supporting for. And then this is practiced more in case of Mexico for an example, and also many more countries are replicating this. And then coming to IKLK, this is indigenized knowledge or local knowledge kind of things. So this kind of adaptations are many, the examples are many. Let us say some varieties of TK of Konda Reddy in India to shift the agroforestry practices in terms of Khassia and Tripura communities in Bangladesh, and then use of ecological knowledge by small scale fisher farmers in Amazonian floodplains. So such kind of local and indigenous knowledge, or you say indigenous and local knowledges, are available in bits and process. So we must try to see and replicate these kind of what you say indigenous and local knowledge, which with appropriate modification and localized what you say localized requirement, so that it can be scaled up and will yield the result in terms of adaptation response to water usage. And then coming to the 16th one, I think it is with respect to flood risk reduction measures include what non-structural measures for flood management. So you that is for example changes in day-to-day packets in terms of Indonesia, practices in terms of Indonesia, place specific social structures in UK, structural measures, you construct structural measures, bonds and other things to arrest or to deal with flood management, improvement of drainage systems in terms of Indonesia, flood wall construction in Beria, and dredging and construction of culverts. You dredge the river course, so you allow the space, the three-dimensional space to contain more water, so that you escape from flash floods or other things. So dredging is also should be practiced in all the countries in terms of river dredging, so as to contain a lot of water during the flood time or during the post rainy season. And then construction of culverts. So there are different civil ways, different ways in terms of civil construction to treat with to deal with the flood risk or to reduce this, and also early warning system. If you get a warning early that this much of downpour will be there, that will lead to this much of what you say base flow and surface flow, then you are ready in terms of flood forecasting and all the measures to deal with the flood situation. Flood resilient housing, we need to come out with the houses which are resilient to flood. So, examples are there in terms of shifting these houses from here to there. So, Guyana, Pakistan, Vietnam, Philippines, which are the countries, these are the countries which are receiving frequent floods. So, the houses, particularly flood resilient houses, are appearing or are practiced there. So, they can be shipped if there is a pre information of flood arrival. And then wetland restoration. So, wetland restoration is practiced nowadays in many countries including US, Netherlands. And the 17th one is the urban water management. In terms of the urban water management, we have the incorporating low impact developments and urban design features for sustainable urban drainage systems in Spain, and green infrastructure in terms of ecological stormwater storage and renaturalization. You just go for plantation, that is the green infrastructure you develop, that will help in terms of managing the urban water. Even if the desalination of water supplies in terms of in Spain. So, you have a lot of water in the nearby sea, and you take the desalination, put lot of desalination plant and use that water for any other purpose. You convert that, remove the salt and you treat it or convert it to a sweet water for other uses. So, energy related adaptation in terms of hydropower related. So, hydropower benefit sharing, particularly in Mekong basin and in Nepal also. So, people who means in terms of hydropower, you arrest the water and then you take it in terms of the energy generation or many other benefits from that. So, that has to also be in a benefit sharing mode, who are suffering or the people who are near around are being suffered means upstream and downstream. And then other what you say renewable energy related things, and then the 19th one is the wash related. So, as we discussed, the water sanitation and health sector related adaptation in terms of hand washing and hygiene, provision of latrines and washing hands with soaps in Bangladesh, they are doing it, practicing safe drinking water and sanitation, particularly piped water supply in China, so that we take care of our good health, good sanitation, and any other including the coping strategies, reduce consumption. So, how we need to adapt, we need to cope, it is a very regular thing, we need to reduce consumption, and selling of assets, selling of high soil property. So, all this and consumption pattern smoothing and reducing consumption in Nepal. So, these are the examples, these are the instruments, these are already in practices successfully in different parts of the world. That is why we have taken all these things for our discussion, to know what are the options we have in terms of dealing with the adaptation response which are coming from the risks of hydrology or water sector. Now, let us look at the on y axis you have all the list in terms of water related adaptations. On the x axis upper one, you can see the circle size with respect to the confidence or the high, low, medium, and the color in terms, the dark one gives you the high confidence, and similarly the gray one gives you very low, and you have a in between. So, drought. So, in terms of drought, how much is the confidence in terms of when we adopt this water related responses. So, similarly you can try to see it for precipitation variability and extremes, for heat related, for inland and river floods, for soil erosion and sediment load change, for groundwater availability change, for poor water quality, for cryosphere storage. So, cryosphere you all know in terms of snow and glaciers, and also in terms of storm the pest, the coastal hazards, the general climate impact and other things. So, if you see from the first 1 and 2 in terms of the left hand side, you see the drought and the precipitation variability and the extremes. So, many of these adaptation measures are having a kind of high strength in terms of their evidence and also having a high confidence level. So, this kind of study analysis and information helps us in replicating these successful examples to the rest of the world with local local level modifications. Similarly, if we group these water related responses into individual households, into civil society, into government, particularly local and subnational, government national, international and multinational, private sector and others. So, accordingly you see the individual, it is very reliable and confidence is very high and the evidence is very high. So, this kind of depiction gives us lot of information in terms of various sectors or actors are involved. Now, with respect to projection, look at this and look at the different improved outcomes as far as the current scenario, and on the right hand side as far as the future scenario with respect to 1.5, 2 degree, 3 degree and 4 degree change. So, in terms of effectiveness and in terms of residual risk. So, residual risk remaining after adaptation. So, accordingly you see all those different set of 18 to 20 set of water related adaptation responses have been categorized, have been rated. So, this helps us in knowing that what are the water related response in terms of current and the future. Having understood this, let us talk about the constraints. Friends, it is not that easy. So, understanding the constraint. So, the color and the dimension similar way talks about the constraint in terms of extent of which constraint is present, insufficient, limited, moderate and significant. So, just have a look at it. So, in terms of economic and finance, so financial constraint is really coming very prominently, and the second one is coming, that is the fourth and fifth column are more prominent. The fifth one is governance, institution and policies. So, that is where we really need to work. These are the bottlenecks, these are the constraints in terms of really adapting the water related water related responses. So, we need to look at this very well, and there are very less as far as biological, cultural and also technical is concerned, but main is coming. The other one is also you can see the information and awareness. So, training and other things also needs to be done at a very high scale. So, economic, finance, governance, institution and policies and also information and awareness, these 4-5 are very top priority or takes the top seat as far as the various constraints posed, okay, for adapting these water responses or responses as far as the water related risks are concerned. So, friends, we discussed, we have taken help of the fourth chapter from this from the working group 2 report, and in turn we discussed briefly the 19 or I would say 20 different responses we have in offer, and we elaborated the case studies and where they are practiced, and so that means the successful case studies have been discussed. And then we discussed the who are the actors and the beneficiaries and the outcomes of that, and then we try to see how successful they could be or they are in the current scenario and they could be in the futuristic scenario in terms of adaptation, and with adaptation how much and without also, or after adaptation also how much still will be left, that also have been shown. So, that gives us lot of confidence that whatever we are talking, where actually they could be, if we really invest on that, if we really practice those steps or we really adapt to those scenarios, those conditions. And then towards end we talked about the constant, and there we need to work. We need to work out. We need to work out in terms of financial and economic. We need to work out in the government mindset and policy things, and also we need to work out and invest in terms of teaching and training. So, this particular lecture is a step forward in terms of teaching and training, and I hope this lecture will serve the purpose very well. Thank you very much.